You may think we're reviewing this fat, ugly piece of shit today, but you're wrong. If you've been watching my channel for a good hot minute, you would know that I am a very, very large fan of the Beasts of the Mesozoic line and everything that has come out for it. But today I want to specifically highlight the Beasts of the Mesozoic Ceratopsian line, not only so other people who love this line can enjoy this video, but also so people who don't really know much about this can get invested in it, hopefully. Although, fair warning, it does come with a fair amount of issues. But first up on the agenda, we have the Styracosaurus, which is, I believe, the newest figure I have in this set. And it's not a bad one either. This guy is a very, very hefty figure, and one that I think is a pretty good start for those who are just starting up a collection, although mine did come with a crest that's kind of bent weirdly for whatever reason. It's not too noticeable, especially from these angles, but if you were to look at it from dead on, you can definitely kind of tell. One of the main allures of Beasts of the Mesozoic is the fact that they are very highly articulated, especially compared to a lot of other dinosaur figures. The head and neck joint work really, really well to get a lot of dynamic poses, and that is just the start of it. There is a waist joint, however, it's pretty pointless on most of the bigger figures, including the Styracosaurus, so just forget it. The feet can also move, there's also a knee joint, and of course at the base of the leg. This means that you can spread the legs out, get them in a walking position, and all that other fun stuff. The back legs have almost the exact same thing, and of course, the tail can also move. Now onto a reoccurring segment throughout this video, size comparison time with this thing, the Hammond Collection Triceratops. Reason being, I want to show off how good the Beast of the Mesozoic line is, meanwhile how fucking mid the Hammond Collection Triceratops is. Genuinely, this figure is one of the most mediocre things I've ever seen. But we got a lot more figures to review, so get the frig out of here. And enter Shrek with horns and uh-oh. Now, truthfully, this head thing is not the end of the world. It's not that bad. You can easily plug it right back in and it stays there. Just anytime you touch it, it does that. But once you do get it in there, you can get some nice sturdy poses with the figure. And this is probably one of the more timid looking ones. Avoceratops is, oh yeah, I haven't even mentioned the name of this figure yet, have I? Avoceratops here is a pretty timid looking boy. His articulation is roughly the same. You're going to get the exact same posability out of what you got of the Styracosaurus. I think that makes grammatical sense. Anyway, you are going to see that the ab crunch here is actually a lot better than it was on the Styracosaurus. Especially in photos, it does look a lot better than a lot of the other figures, and again, this is because of the size. However, every bit of articulation on this guy is the exact same as all of the other ones, other than that. Oh, and something that I forgot to mention, all of the figures do have a posable mouth. You can close and open it with ease to give it a little bit of personality. But who cares about personality when you have a tiny-ass Triceratops, although it is bigger than the Avo by a little bit. And here's a figure that's so goddamn forgettable you didn't even see it when I opened up the review. Here is the Eotriceratops, which is actually pretty alright, even though I forgot to put him in the thing, you know, that thing, yeah. While the colors on this guy are a little bit more dull than a lot of the other figures, I still do like the grays, and especially the stripes on the horns. I think that's a very unique detail that originally he didn't even add, but I am glad that he put it on there. And by he, I mean the guy who makes these things, David fucking Silva, my god. I actually got this figure for a discounted price over at Dan's Dinosaurs, not a sponsor by the way. However, I can gladly say that I'm happy that I got this figure for sponsored because it's probably the least favorite of all of the figures I've got. Not to say it is bad, it is just not as striking as a lot of the other very, very vibrant colors that we'll see later in this review. Eotriceratops here has the exact same articulation as the Avoceratops, so I'm not going to show it again, but here's what they look like next to each other. How fun. And here's the Hammond Collection Triceratops. Cool, let's move on. Moving on to the smallest figure in the line, we have the Zuniceratops, which is pretty goddamn cool, if I must say so myself, partially because it is the first figure I got from this line. This guy definitely has some of the more vibrant colors in the entire line, and this is kind of what I meant earlier when I was talking about the Eotriceratops. The grays there, while nice, were not as powerful as this Zuniceratops' orange and blues and other fun stuff. This guy is the easiest one to film articulation for because he is very, very small. His head can do that, his jaw can do that, his neck can do that. All of the other fun stuff that we've talked about previously, this guy can do just on a much smaller scale. Important note, not all of these guys have original sculpts. You are going to see a lot of reused parts on these figures. Like I said earlier, the Avoceratops and Eotriceratops have the exact same sculpt. That's why I didn't show the Eotriceratops' articulation. on. However, this Zuniceratops actually does not have that issue. It does have a completely original sculpt. Everything on here is new. Blah. But since Zuniceratops is the smallest one I own, the biggest one I own is holy fuck. This is the Pentaceratops, and oh my god, it is fantastic. This thing is massive and glorious, and what else have I not used yet as an adjective? It's big. It's really big. These are another set of colors that just pop. They are really, really good, and I am a very, very big fan, especially of that black and orange. They look really nice. And again, what is so nice is the sheer heft of this figure. He is a very, very big boy. He is so big, in fact, that he was actually very, very hard for me to get the articulation recorded in one shot. However, I finally managed to do it, and as you can see here, the joints are nice. However, they are a little bit, creaky. In fact, one downside to this figure is that because of its heft, it's actually very hard to move sometimes due to the joints being so damn tight. This waist joint is practically useless. The legs, what legs? The tail joint's okay though, at least. Glass break. And to close off the Pentaceratops section, here it comes, that ugly piece of shit. It's just roaming in now any second, and there it is, that ugly rodent rat. And speaking of big fellas, the Pachyrhinosaurus is one of the most aesthetically and visually appealing of all of the figures that have came out for this line, and definitely has the best coloring. My god, it's great. In fact, I'd have to say I think I like this guy's colors more than the Pentaceratops, although that's about the only thing I like better than the Pentaceratops. Now listen, I don't think that this feature really compromises the mode too much. It is kind of there, and it sticks out kind of like a sore thumb, but it's really not that bad. It's not that big of a flaw, and I can get around it. What I can't get around, though, is the fact that it kind of alludes that the jaw on this figure is not very good. Now, again, I don't want to be too harsh to this figure because you can plug it right back in and it's just as good as new, but it really sucks because, like, that's the one loose part about this figure, and everything else is really, really stable. In fact, this is about the only loose joint I have on any of my Beast of the Mesozoic figures, besides this one. And because of the fact that this joint is so loose, and it's also kind of tight at the same time in some areas, it is prone to scraping off the paint. This figure is almost $100. But with the jaw off, this can give us room to show off the very, very well hidden tongue articulation, which is virtually impossible to get access to because it's very, very far back there. In fact, on the Pentaceratops, I could not at all get it. And yes, this is on all of the larger figures that you'll see in this line, but here you can really see it good. And here's the comparison between the house. Moving on. And what's next, baby? The Nasutoceratops. That's what, oh, that's a really bad shot. Better. Now, some of you may be asking, why did I buy the Beast of the Mesozoic Nasutoceratops when there's already a Jurassic World one? To which I would tell you that I actually do respect paleontology sometimes, and as well as that, I just like the aesthetic of this design a lot more. I've even heard some people call this the ugliest of the Beast of the Mesozoic Ceratopsians, and I couldn't disagree more. This guy actually looks really nice in my opinion. My only issue with the figure is that when you open the mouth wide enough, you can see that little gap right there, but truthfully, it doesn't bother me too much. That's about the only problem I have with it in general. At least it has mouth articulation, unlike some figures. Another thing it has over the trike is the head articulation. It is fantastic on this figure. This one is definitely one of the more expressive of the Ceratopsians, and it is definitely all because of this neck and head joint. We already saw articulation on the Avoceratops, so I won't do that again. Here's a better size comparison between these two. And why not the next figure be a dinosaur that actually lived alongside Nasuto in real life? And it's the Cosmoceratops, which is actually one of my favorite figures from this entire damn line. This figure is great. Now, Cosmoceratops is not really a dinosaur I have a strong passion for or anything. I just really like the aesthetic look of this figure. The pink, the black, all of it makes this figure pop out. It's definitely one of the most colorful of all of the figures in the line. Another strong thing about the Cosmoceratops is the fact that the posability on it is fantastic. Like the Nasutoceratops, this allows the Cosmo to be very, very expressive with how you pose it. And speaking of posability, let's get onto the actual articulation of this figure, which again is fantastic. The head and neck joint again are making this figure look great with everything you pose it in. I've said great at least 20 times throughout this video, oh my god. Everything else on the figure though is about the exact same as other Beast of the Mesozoic figures. It's got the waist joints, the legs joint, the tail joint, yada yada yada. Let's move on. You've seen this 1,000 times already. Why do you need to see it again, you insomniac fuck? And speaking of things we've seen 1,000 times at this point, here is the Hammer Collection Triceratops again. But there's better figures we can look at. Come on now, get that out of here and put something else in. Yeah, there we go. It's the Diabloceratops, and again, this is one of the most visually striking of all of these figures. I can't say it enough. These are all great. Yeah, the horn unfortunately has a sad tendency to fall out. It's partially my fault. I probably handled it a little bit too much and now it's loose and it really doesn't stay in place very well. Any slight movement will cause it to fall out of place like that, so that's a little bit disheartening. But you can plug the horn back in with really no issue and it looks fantastic on there. And I believe I actually did make a video about this guy not too long ago for Ancient Dinosaur Profile Season 3, I believe. I remember this was not a planned episode. I had just gotten the figure and I wanted to use it for something because I had such a great time messing with it and playing around with the figure. So I put it in an Ancient Dinosaur Profile episode, and still to this day, that's one of my favorite episodes of the show. And I still have that same sense of awe and wonder when I play around with this figure that I did when I just had gotten it. Also, notice how the jaw does not have that gap like the Nasutoceratops does, Speaking of which, here is the Nasutoceratops alongside the Diablo, along with the other two that share that mold, the Ionosaurus and Avoceratops. All of them look great, but the Diablo is definitely my favorite amongst all of them. Here's a good size comparison amongst the four to give a good reference, and HC Trike. Next! I think I said earlier that the Ionosaurus was like my least favorite of all the Ceratopsians. However, after handling this figure for the first time in a little while, I can confidently say I don't actually think that's the case anymore. It's the Regaliceratops. Now, when I say this guy is the worst of the line, I mean, like, we're talking about Beasts of the Mesozoic here. Every figure is going to be good, and the Regaliceratops is no exception. This figure is good. Just, it has issues that I don't like. But let us start off with the good things I like about this fat ass. First of all, the colors are very nice. I like the red and the black and the orange. They all make for a very nice color scheme. It looks like a gigantic fucking tomato. Probably because it's based off of the tomato frog. And like the tomato frog, the Regaliceratops figure is one of the cuter ones in the line. Like I said earlier, the Avoceratops is kind of shy looking, and this Regaliceratops kind of has that same thing going for it. In fact, my friend, Some Stupid Sketch Show guy, claims this figure is his favorite in the line because of that reason. Too bad I'm about to cut into it. Listen, this figure is good, and this is probably making me seem like I really hate the thing, but I actually don't. But there's one thing I dislike about it, and it is the neck, head, and jaw articulation. Because my god, they're some of the most like limited and unexpressive of the entire line. The neck and head joint work fine, but because of the frill, you really can't look up or down with it too much. The neck is also to where it's a little bit difficult there, but that really doesn't bother me too much. It's really the jaw joint, because in certain positions, it's really, really tight. In other positions, it's really, really loose, and I don't know why it's that way. I don't know what makes it so, like, bipolar. That's the best word I can describe it. The jaw on this figure is just, The head joint, I just ended up deciding to try and, like, forcefully open it, which was a bad idea. Don't do that. And that actually ended up breaking, like, the top headpiece off a little bit. So whenever I move it, it's now kind of like this. But it could be worse. Boy, I'm going to have a fun time editing that section, I bet. But we only have two more figures to look at, and they're both pretty good, starting off with the Cosmosaurus. Oh my god. This figure is one of the very literal highlights from the first wave of this series because it's probably the most striking of all of the figures. I know I say that literally every time, but dear god, this one's bright. Some people might even say a little bit too bright, but I actually don't think so. Mine actually has some dry brushing on it, which mutes the colors quite a lot, and truthfully, I don't actually like too much, but it really is not that big of a deal, and I still think the figure looks good. It's even been called the Beacon by some collectors, and yeah, that name definitely fits. The facial markings are fantastic on this figure. They're probably the best of the entire line, mimicking the actual shape of the head and crest, which is a very nice touch. And y'all know me, I love some good head and neck joints. Also, pro tip, do not grab the figure by the crest and move it. I've heard this is actually a way to break the figure. Grab it by the head or the eyes or something, grab it by the base and move it that way. Don't do it by the crest, that's a no-no. Chasmo good, Trike bad, it's small. It shouldn't have to be said, but this Cosmosaurus figure is one of the best figures in the entire line in my opinion. It's probably at least my top 3 of the favorites, and yeah, this guy is, I can't really simp that much for it because, again, I'm running out of adjectives. But hey, for shits and giggles, let's do a one-off review before we actually get to the final Beast of the Mesozoic Ceratopsian figure, which, of course, would be the Hammond Collection Triceratops. Believe it or not, I do not actually hate this figure. I just think that it is very flawed compared to the Beast of the Mesozoic Ceratopsians, but I'll say a few positive things about it, don't worry. First of all, the paint and detail on this figure is great. The detail is about the same as the Beast of the Mesozoic figures, but the paint can actually get a little bit better here and there. For example, the horns, I feel like I like the Hammond Collection Trikes better than the more clean horns that we got in the Beast of the Mesozoic line. Of course, there definitely is flaws though. This figure is tiny, and yes, I know people have said before that the Jurassic Park Triceratops is small. However, I still feel like this figure should have been bigger. I get that the Beast of the Mesozoic line is 1/18th scale and the Hammond Collection / other Mattel figures are 1/20th, but still, this is inexcusable. And of course, here's a human figure for reference so you can see how large they are next to each other, and this looks a little bit more accurate, but then again, I definitely feel like the trike should have been just a little bit bigger. But hey, let's go on to articulation now. The head does have a ball joint, which is very, very poseable, although it doesn't really look down that well, but it can do a 360, which is nice. What it does not have, though, is a mouth joint. There's no such thing on it. In fact, there's also no waist joint on this figure, which isn't too bad, but still. Also, this leg, for whatever reason, is really, really loose, compared to all the other joints. This is the only one that's loose on the figure, which is really weird. However, it does have the knee joints as usual, and the ankle joints too. Just like the Beast of the Mesozoic figures, the back legs also have the exact same amount of articulation, although, unlike the Beast of the Mesozoic ones, they had a double ankle joint. I'll show a picture of it now of what I'm talking about, but it doesn't have that, although the tail makes up for it with not 1 but 2 ball joints for a lot of articulation. God, that was in one take. I really hope I didn't screw it up. So yeah, the Triceratops is an alright figure. It's not as bad as I've made it out to be, but there's always going to be a better figure and even a best figure, because my jumping jelly beans, the Utahceratops, is by far my favorite figure in this entire line, period, no comma, question mark. Similar to the Pentaceratops, this is another big figure. It actually uses the exact same mold the Pentaceratops has, with a few differences here and there, like the tail. This figure still has a lot of presence though, similar to the Pentaceratops, and definitely is probably the most eye-striking of all of the figures that I have thus far. But the true question is it worth the price? Yes! I've called these figures great, fantastic, but one thing that I think I can say about the Pentaceratops the most out of all of the figures, it's fucking beautiful. I remember before this figure actually came out, the concept art was posted for it, and I had that as my phone background for quite a while. I was that weird kid in class, yes. But as I have the figure in person, I can definitely say that it is much, much more striking. It is much, much more vibrant, and especially I like the blacks more than I do the more darkish greens. But hey, we also need a size comparison in here, so here is one with a lot of figures like the Zuniceratops, the Pachyrhinosaurus, and the Hammond Collection Triceratops, all from Mattel. Again, this Utahceratops figure is pretty damn big. It's about the same size as the Pentaceratops. In fact, it has that same body mold. I would say I wouldn't do articulation again, but for this figure, I will because I love it so much. So here is all the articulation points it's got. This figure is borderline perfect in my opinion. The colors are the most striking of the entire lot. Out of every single one of them, this one has the best colors. Not necessarily objectively, But to me, I'm a big fan of oranges, reds, and blacks mixed together. They are all very nice. So to see this figure embody that, I was really, really happy about. The only issues I have with the entire figure are the same ones I had with the Pentaceratops. There are some joints on it, particularly on the legs, that are way too tight, but they are severely more loose than the Penta, like in a good way. The Penta was way, way too tight. This one, on the other hand, feels perfect. It feels fine. It is not that way. As much as I would like to keep simping over this figure, I think this video needs to be wrapped up here because it's already almost 20 minutes long. Dear God, I haven't uploaded in nearly a month. Hey, it's been a very busy Thanksgiving, okay? I guess this is a Thanksgiving special episode, so happy turkey month to those who support that. But still, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. What do I outro with again? Oh.